So we did not take action on the preliminary site development plan. Had some, there was a committee that met to take a look at traffic issues that not only involving this area, but north of the intersection. And there's also some commentary about questions about the setback of the station pumps off from the roadway right away. So this is an opportunity to kind of bring us up to date. Frank, are you going to take the lead on that?
Yes. If you don't mind, Mr. Chair, if I can give you an update. We were tasked with running the Access Management Committee, so if I can give you a quick update on how that turned out. And then we'll ask the applicants to discuss updates to their plan, particularly as it relates to the pump setbacks. This project will be on your March 18th agenda for preliminary and final area site plan review. And I say that with some confidence from a scheduling standpoint because the first reading of the rezoning went through City Commission. So typically, if the first reading goes through, the second reading will be approved. So the project is moving forward. But there's a couple of pieces we just wanted to give you an update on for tonight. Okay. So we met on prior to our Planning Commission meeting on the 19th of February, and we met from 6 to 6:40, and we achieved all of the whole list of what we wanted to get through. So here's a rundown of what we did. Of course, that's not going to work, so I have to go over here. The battery is broke. Okay, a lot of words. What were we tasked with? Our task was to get a group together, including MDOT, the city, the developer, and planning commissioners, and look at access management points on Wilson Avenue and Leonard Street for this AGO gas station and for the Lewis Farms property to the north. Essentially what all those words say. It's important for AGO tonight, to be fair to them, that we're not going to talk about Lewis Farms. That's something that you folks will see later this spring as a work session item. Then we'll bring that project back, we'll sit around the table, and then we'll work out the access management interior to that site. This is really for the exterior access points. Okay? Even though you will see some comments on what we might do for Lewis Farms, that's for another time, but it was all encompassed in the committee meeting. Just keep that in mind if you would. We went to a whiteboard, and it's a crude method of doing stuff like this, but it's effective because you can change decisions and discuss things on the fly. So you see an image of the whiteboard that we used, and the crude traffic signal there in the bottom left is the intersection of Leonard Street and Wilson M11. And then AGO was at the southeastern corner, not including the bargain store piece of property. So what we looked at was there are currently 2 access points on M11 and a recent access point on Leonard Street, and then Lewis Farms had 4 access points planned, 2 on Wilson and then 2 on Leonard Street. So what we worked out, and let me just make sure I'm following the script here. The dashed interior lines that are on Lewis Farms, that's as is on the current PASP for that project. So the network you see on there is what you folks approved. At the City Commission, we agreed to do some things that we'll talk about when we get together with Lewis Farms, and we worked it out with the neighbors. But the takeaway is the dashed lines you see on Lewis Farms are as approved on the current PASP. And then the dashed line through the AGO lot is the route shown on the plan that you folks looked at last time. And generally, that's just a dashed line through the site. So keep in mind the access points. And what we worked out on specific to AGO was the Wilson Avenue driveway will be right in, right out. The more northerly Wilson Avenue driveway will close. And then the Leonard Street driveway will stay as is, recently reconstructed with the Leonard Street project. The Lewis Farms folks agreed to shift their driveway over to make sure that it aligns center line to center line with the AGO, which is great. And then we also worked out full service drive on M11 going north onto Lewis Farms, right in, right out, all the way at the top of the picture there. And then the Leonard Street driveway furthest east will align Lewis Farms and Maple Street, which is private. And that's really all we wanted the committee to do, was just make sure the designs are right for the driveways, particularly on M11 because that's MDOT's road, and we check that box. And then on Leonard Street, align the center lines of the driveways, and we check that box. It's really all we were there to do, and we got it all done, so that's our update there. I included this trace drawing, but all I'm going to say is this one we need to discuss with the Lewis Farms developers, both Dave and Steve Visser, and the Planning Commission and staff, and we'll schedule that for a work session later this spring. Okay. So AGO should be ready to go, and tonight we're going to get an update. And the one thing I would, Terry, you hit it on it already, but I think the most important piece of the puzzle for these folks is laying out those pumps. Are you happy with that or not? So I'll get out of the way. You have the whole AGO team here, and we'll see what kind of comments we come up with for these folks.
Do you have the AGO? Mr. Whitty?
Commissioners, my name is Steve Whitty from Netterveld, here tonight representing AGO. With me in attendance tonight is Jason Barris, who is the owner of AGO. First of all, I'd like to thank you for your time and consideration regarding this request. We actually requested to be in front of you tonight, hopefully to give you an update, not only to give you an update, but also maybe to get some feedback on some of the comments that we received at the preliminary area site plan. And then our hope is that when we're back in front of you on March 18, everything is hashed out and that meeting goes smoothly. So that's, I guess, a little background on why we're in front of you tonight, more informational. Frank did an excellent job giving you an update of the traffic study, the traffic committee. One other thing I would like to point out is with that right in, right out only on Wilson, the traffic study did recommend a deceleration taper for that drive. And then in talking to MDOT, they want a 225-foot taper. So that's what our final area site plan shows. And that has been submitted to MDOT for their review and approval. And then I know city staff is also reviewing that. So there is going to be a taper on that drive. And then the two main things that I think that we talked about at the preliminary area site plan was I think there was a question on the truck access and the truck parking as it fills up the tanks. If you want, I can show you that again in the truck maneuvering. I've run auto turn on that, and the site does flow very smoothly. Auto turn, in my opinion, is notoriously conservative, meaning that if auto turn shows it works, guarantee it'll work. If it shows it doesn't work, that doesn't mean it doesn't work. That just means it's a little more tricky. But auto turn very clearly shows that it does work. If you'd like, I can throw that on the overhead screen and you can take a look at it if you'd like. Okay. And I kind of showed you this at the preliminary area site plan meeting too, but what I looked at, right now we've got the underground fuel tanks here. This isn't a magical location. We could very easily move it to here if the Planning Commission wants. Our preference would be to keep it here. Our preference would be to keep it here just because it's out of the way and it's close to the fuel islands. What I have in orange is where a tanker truck could sit while they're filling up the tanks. And then what we looked at is in green is a full semi coming around the back of the building, swinging around, and then leaving off Wilson. And then as I had shown before, a person, a pickup truck or a car coming in off of Wilson would be the truck path in pink. So that, again, you can see we're not really hugging any corners. It does flow very nicely in our opinion. So I don't know if this is sufficient for the Planning Commission or if you want me to look at a different path or turning. I'd be more than happy to do that if you'd like me to. But this is kind of where we're at from a truck turning standpoint. I'll go back there now.
Any comments or questions concerning that? I think that the question was raised before was whether it would be a vision obstruction. And it's back a certain distance, but if there's going to be that taper lane there, as you've got traffic coming into the site, traffic that's going to be circulating to use a right-hand turn going north, will that not represent somewhat of a obscure the vision of what's going on in that part of the site? And if you could move that a little bit further to the east, it would maybe minimize that a bit.
I don't see a big problem with moving that a little bit further to the east. I can scale it off, but just eyeballing it, we're still 20 feet off the additional 10 foot of right of way, so it is set back a fair amount already. But yeah, there's not, like I said, we can move it back another 5-10 feet or whatever you'd like. There's nothing magical with that location, so I don't see a problem with that.
If they were to move back beyond the setback line, would that be sufficient? I mean, that really would only be
Like-
maybe 10 feet at the most. Is that kind of what you were looking for?
Well, yeah, it's just that if you've got somebody that's gone through the pumps and they're circling back to get onto Wilson to go northbound, they may be traveling closer to that tanker if it's unloading, and that's where the vision might be obscured.
Car coming in?
I'm
Or
thinking
just
more
traffic
of a car that's exiting the site. So they've been at the pumps, they're circling back around, they're gonna head north on, so they may be coming in where that green line is.
Yep.
Those two green lines, that may be the path that the exiting vehicle may be taking to get back out onto Wilson.
Yeah, so if that's the case, though, I wouldn't push it too much further back. I would
Yeah.
say go back to the setback line so that way at least you know that you're not visually blocking anything from, the right in, right out, but it still allows for movement on that backside. Because if you get somebody who's parked in that, those two parking spaces that are on that corner there, that's going to start
Yep.
being a pinch point if you push that truck too far back. So I think happy medium is get back beyond the setback line, and then that would be good.
Yeah,
Yeah, and again, with what I drew in as the truck in orange, that was just me arbitrarily putting it there. So I mean, I can very easily move the tanks and the representation of the semi another 5 feet or 10 feet further to the east. But just for clarification, from the edge of this fuel island to where I'm showing the truck park is about 35 feet. So even if there is a car parked here fueling up, at the edge of the canopy to the edge of the truck is still at 25 feet. So there's a fair amount of distance there that's going to be available even if the truck is there. But again, I don't have any problem sliding it back, so that's fine.
as far as the applicant goes, is there a particular time during the day that they would generally do the fueling, or is that pretty wide open?
It's kind of wide open, but really, I mean, the delivery, you're looking at probably a 45-minute stop. And usually, I mean, it could be 2-3 times a week, so it's not like every day. And it's not like when pop vendors or other trucks come in, they'll probably park around the back or something like that. So that's not going to be like the only spot where all deliveries can come in and stuff. So, and then when they do schedule it, usually sometimes these guys start at 2-3 in the morning, so they could be out of there. Most of these places don't even see the trucks when it's busy. So.
The other nice thing about this location is you can see on the right, the entrance at least, the straight line there, it's out of the way, it's south of the drive, so it fits nicely where it's shown. But like I said, whether we keep it where it's at or slide it 5 or 10 feet, not a big deal.
Frank or Scott, any?
I was going to try to chime in. I apologize for not giving you any kind of report on this. I wasn't aware that this was going to be back on. I kind of missed it, unfortunately, in the fever of putting these other reports together. I'd be more worried about the truck as it exits than as it just sits there. Because if you look at the lines there, the green lines and the red lines cross at kind of a critical point, and that truck would logically even have to back up just to make that movement. It's really... I'd prefer to see them push that back as far as possible so that you don't have the truck awkwardly turning right to get out of there with a car coming in hot off a 55-mile-an-hour road, and then somebody has to stop or somebody has to wait. That's the bigger conflict, I think, as it relates to M11.
So real quick to that, I wasn't going to say anything just because I'm used to the business, but it's actually the truck's backwards. So I didn't know if that would be an issue, but if they're going to pull in, they're going to be facing towards the east. Because usually they offload on the passenger side, so more than likely they would probably come in on the right end, swing around, and then they go back out Leonard. So that's probably what would happen, 99 times out of 100.
I think we should have Steve add the
I'll
truck turning
draw that
templates
then.
for pulling into that spot then as
Yeah.
well.
Yep. I'll add that, obviously.
And again, we'll have some time between now and that next meeting so that you can get that information to the city engineer to have him take a closer look at that aspect of it.
Great. So I think I'm all set with that part of it. Then the other thing I wanted to get your opinion on is there were some comments after the meeting, after the preliminary site plan meeting, about the setback of the canopy off Wilson and then also the green space between Wilson and our site. To kind of analyze that, it's not really a scientific method, but I had our administrative support people take a look at just Ottawa County and Kent County GIS information. Just Kent County GIS information about different gas stations in Walker and then in Kentwood. And I think you probably saw that. And then I had them put together a spreadsheet listing the setbacks of canopies off the road to the canopy, and then also the green space from the edge of the road to where the pavement on these other gas station properties located. I did not in any way, shape, or form weed out the information. I simply told our administrative support, look at everything you can find, put it on paper. So then we developed a spreadsheet, and then just as a comparison purpose, I took all the values that we got throughout the low 3 numbers and the high 3 numbers and found an average. Again, I realize every site's different, so it doesn't necessarily matter. But the average that I got from a canopy standpoint off the edge of pavement was 57.3 feet, and ours is 84 feet. And then the green space provided off the edge of the pavement, the average of all of the ones that we looked at was 18.4 feet, and we've got 28 feet. And again, that's not necessarily, doesn't matter necessarily, but maybe it's a good rule of thumb. The other thing, I live in Georgetown Township, so I drive up Wilson to get to here. And the other thing that, and you can look at it between now and the next meeting, the front of the canopy is kind of right between the two faces of the Just Bargain site. So if you go out there and look at it, that's a very good representation. You can kind of eyesight see where that front edge would be. My own opinion in driving it is it looks like it's far enough back, in my opinion, but I'm not the one deciding either. So if you have any concerns or comments on that, we'd appreciate that as well. So that's, I guess, the other thing that we wanted input on.
Any comments on, or questions about that aspect of it, that relative setback?
There was one, I'm going off of memory now. There was one on there that was 55 mile an hour. What was the setback on that one?
I don't see one off the, from what I'm looking, oh yeah, there was.
like
The
seventh
setback
down or something.
on that one was, there was 2 setbacks, one at 104 and then one at 54. And then again, we're at 84, so we're kind of in between the 2
Yeah.
yards there. And then the green space on that one was 18 feet and 42 feet, and we're at 28 feet. So we're kind of in between the 2 yards, and I'm not sure what, it's 213 Wilson Avenue. I'm not sure what gas station that is.
That was one of them that I looked at comparison just because of the speed.
Yeah.
Yeah, but generally it seemed like this was okay for what, in my opinion, based on what they were doing.
Okay. Yeah, I guess the wild card here is that one of the conditions that's being recommended is that there'd be allowance for another 10-foot of right-of-way along the frontage. So at some point in the future, if Wilson were to be expanded, my presumption is that 10-foot green space would disappear, and that's where the sidewalk would end up, on that outer edge of it. I don't know if that's a reasonable assumption, that would be the eventuality.
Could be.
So we'd have a sidewalk, and it's a future time period, but we have to look at not only now, but into the future, where that sidewalk would be, it'd be sidewalk, and all the pavement is using for maneuvering area to get in and out of the pumps. And I think as a pedestrian, it's a little more comfortable if you've got some buffer there, rather than the pavement right up to it. But that's one of the perspectives I wanted to share and see whether there was agreement on that or whether that's a non-factor.
Well, the other thing is this is close to a light, so you're genuinely sometimes slowing down. I mean, I guess the light could be green and people are just ripping through there, but a portion of the time they are slowing down. So it kind of, I was okay with it. I guess that's my opinion on it.
Okay. Any other comments on that?
I'm sure you saw, but I'm showing the sidewalk 1 foot inside the existing right of way.
We got to zoom out just a little bit.
Oh, sorry. And then the distance from the front edge of the sidewalk to the back of the curb is a little over 11 feet right now. So just as a point of clarification. And then Just Bargains, they actually have their pavement right on the existing right of way. And I don't know what it plays into, but I'm sure somebody here knows more than I do on this. I think there's a pretty wide paved shoulder here too, so I don't know if this did end up in the future getting a lane added. I'm not sure how far out that edge would be kicked out.
Yeah, that's something that,
I see what your concern is, though.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Put the lane in and then all of a sudden it's tight again.
yeah. Would we be able to, between now and then, and just check with MDOT and see in this future circumstance what that might be and whether there will be any room there for buffering?
I think the most wisdom they're gonna give us is what we've already speculated right here. That, you know, if this gets widened out someday, it's probably gonna be 11 feet on each side of the road. Everything will get pushed back. Some places like Just Bargains are gonna be really, really messy. This is gonna be a little tighter than it is as proposed, but there'll be issues up and down the road with that scenario. We can certainly check, but I think you're on the money.
Again, we've been asked to give some direction on that. Consensus that this could be okay in the short and longer term. Sure that if you try to ponder it, we can come in with this plan and discuss it anew on 2 weeks from now.
I'm okay with the way it stands right now. The future is the future. I mean, like you said, I think there's some extra lane there to take a right onto Leonard Street. There is a big shoulder there. And how much they're gonna widen it anyways, I don't know. I mean, there's already 4 lanes there now. So I'm okay with the way it stands right now.
Yeah, I tend to agree that on the whole, I think I'm fine with what they presented here tonight as well.
I have my reservations, and I've expressed those, but, again, we don't have to make a decision tonight, they've asked us to. Wait on that, we can wait until the 2 weeks and
In this gas station, are there going to be any electrical, like for battery-powered cars? Is there going to be any charging stations?
I hope not. No, not right now.
I didn't see any on the plan, I just wondered.
Yeah.
I mean, Tesla hasn't got a hold of you yet?
Yeah.
All right, next item on the agenda is case number 20-0856, the site plan review, 4315 3 Mile Road, Specialty Tooling Systems. They're looking for a sizable building expansion, and we'll turn this over to Community Development Director Wash. No, Tricia. Excellent. Tricia Anderson is our Planning Director, Zoning Administrator, and she'll be introducing this.
Okay, so Specialty Tooling Systems at 4315 3 Mile Road is proposing a 43,000 square foot addition to an existing building. You're being asked to grant with conditions or deny the approval of the site plan. So they're located on the northeast corner of Wilson Drive and 3 Mile Road. It's actually a really large site. It's 8.5 acres. So the proposed addition will be the second one that they've had in the last 3 years. The applicant's narrative indicates that the growth of the company is expanding like crazy. And so it sounds like Specialty Tooling Systems is a company that specializes in robotics. And probably the applicant can go into a little bit more detail on what they actually do there. But it's a pretty big site, pretty big building. They're proposing to add the expansion in the area where the stormwater management facilities currently are. So they're completely relocating that. And Scott will get into that a little bit more. A little bit more background. The site is zoned light industrial, 8.51 acres, like I said. And then also the future land use designation for this parcel is industrial. So this is what the building looks like now, pretty huge. And it's almost going to double in size after if the addition is approved. So I just wanted to go through a few highlights of my staff report. The first thing being like I said, they submitted a pretty nice narrative. The only thing missing is that we just need the expected construction schedule from the applicant, when construction is expected to commence. And then hopefully if they have a ballpark of when the construction would wrap up, that would be helpful too. They are obviously proposing several additional parking spaces. There's one area, and the parking looks good, complies with all of our requirements per the zoning ordinance. There's one area in the northeast corner of the site where and correct me if I'm wrong, but this is my take on the situation here, that vehicles, I'm guessing employee vehicles, have been parking on this little strip that borders the parcel at 4303 3 Mile Road. And a portion of it is actually on that neighboring parcel. And so what we've asked the applicant is to enter into a shared parking agreement, or at least a parking easement with that property owner to the east, so that there can be official use of those parking spaces. There's 30 spaces there. Those are not worked into the parking calculations. Regardless of those parking spaces, though, they exceed the number of parking spaces required with the expansion of their parking lot. Let's see what else we have. Yeah, so they want to continue to use that, which is fine, as long as we get a recorded copy of the shared parking agreement. Had the city attorney look through a draft version that they provided to us, and it was more of a license, which in our attorney's opinion was not of any sort of permanent nature. So we're going to need a revised version that's in recordable format that signifies this agreement or an easement. A couple of other minor things here. The expansion of the building obviously is going to have a little bit of wall lighting. There's no lighting proposed, or there is lighting proposed, but there's no lighting shown on the plan. So we would just need a revised plan that shows where any wall pack lighting will be placed on the wall. The arrows on the photo there point to the proposed pole lighting on the site for the parking lot expansion. And yeah, we will need a photometric plan that coincides with the additional lighting that's proposed on the site. And we'll also need the specifications for all the new lighting fixtures that are proposed. My staff report talks about the plan needing to be revised to include the dumpster detail, but I did receive the dumpster detail in an email after getting the staff report out. So here is the screening and the height and type of the dumpster enclosure. There's an existing dumpster there now. Doesn't have anything around it. It's just kind of out there. So we're asking them to, now's a good time to enclose that, that dumpster. And so Scott's gonna go through his items. But there are a couple of things that, were fixed on the plan before Scott had a chance to look at them. One of those was the truck turning radius. And this is why I brought my own flash drive, because I made changes to this presentation after I sent it to you. But I put some snapshots of the truck turning radius that they provided us with. It's right here.
A little bit further.
Or it was right there. Oh, it's right here. The other thing that was on the plan when Scott did his review is the entire bay width in the parking areas. You've got, it showed a 24-foot aisle with 18-foot deep stall depths. And it's got to be a total of 60 feet. So the plan was changed to, and I don't know if that was a typo or not, the 24 feet. So that was changed to reflect 25 feet. So now there's a total of 60 feet. So that's there. So those are just two items from Scott's report that I just wanted to mention were had been fixed. Weird.
Sorry.
Okay. Well,
That's gonna do this thing.
we do have those items in the plan. So as far as recommended conditions of approval, we are looking at providing the recorded copy of the shared parking agreement or parking easement between 4215 3 Mile and 4303 3 Mile prior to the issuance of a building permit. The applicant shall submit a construction schedule with the anticipated dates of construction to the Community Development Department prior to the issuance of a building permit. The applicant shall submit a revised plan that shows any additional lighting proposed for the building prior to the issuance of a building permit. And the applicant shall submit a photometric plan that shows 0-foot candles at all lot lines prior to the issuance of a building permit. And the applicant shall complete all of the items listed in the city engineer's memo dated February 26, 2020, prior to the issuance of a stormwater permit. So, if Scott, if you would like to go into your items, or
Yeah,
if you
are
want
there
to ask
any
any questions?
questions of Tricia on her report?
Just two of them for clarification. The parking spaces, the 30 that they have to the side, those are not listed in the amount that they need, so they don't technically need those.
They don't technically need those, but
Okay.
it's my understanding that they would like to keep using them.
Okay. And if they can't get an agreement with the neighbor, then they would just have to abandon using that.
That would be kind of a private issue.
Okay.
I would, the property owners at 4303 do have the right to say, stop parking on our property. But as far as, site plan approval goes, now's a good time for us to say, hey, why don't we sort of initiate that? Why don't we help you initiate that?
And the dumpster plans that were submitted, those meet the ordinance?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. Joe?
This is a success story, isn't it? I'm impressed with you guys. Are you the two owners?
No, we represent the owners.
Oh, but this is a tremendous expansion. We're glad you're in our city and doing this. And you got to jump through a few hoops for us, obviously, and we do a pretty good job of that stuff, making you jump through hoops. But I'm impressed with this place. My office was an ABC Pediatrics, so I've seen this place develop over the years. And yeah, it's the kind of company we want around here.
Okay, if no other questions, City Engineer Scott Connors, if you could offer your perspectives?
Sure. Maybe before I jump into my report, the parking there on the northeast side, if they did want to just walk away and abandon that, the plan still calls for that to be paved, because I think the last time they came in, we said you've got to pave that area. We don't allow gravel parking lots, gravel parking spots, and it's right next to Sand Creek. All the red flags go up. So even if they want to walk away from it, they'd either have to cover it with topsoil and seed or pave it. So keep that in mind. My report, kind of the first comment really deals with the fact that there's been a lot of iterations here, a lot of expansions, and a lot of cooks in the kitchen. And so one of the things we did was to make sure, with MBN coming on board, that they actually did the full topo survey and they weren't just harvesting data from other people's plans. And Brad confirmed this is 100% their plan. They are the engineer of record moving forward. So if there's a problem with flooding or guardrail off of the driveway or something like that, at least now we're not going to have a bunch of people pointing fingers at each other. We've confirmed that they're the engineer of record for the entire site. Tricia mentioned the parking. They were shown as 18-foot spots with 24-foot aisle for a 60-foot total. The ordinance requires 61. It's kind of a little thing, but that extra foot in the aisle makes a big difference when you're dealing with trucks. If you've driven by this parking lot, there's a lot of trucks here. Tool and die people generally drive bigger vehicles for some reason, and I think that extra foot's going to be handy here. The building itself is proposed to be built on the old detention pond. That's not completely unusual. We see that occasionally, but what it's turned into in the past a lot of times is problems with density. And we want to make sure that this building is going to last a good long time, so it's important that the developer be required to provide information for the building official to show that all the organic material has been removed, all the fill has been placed in that area, and carefully in 1-foot lifts with compaction. That stuff should be gathered now. If there's a debate about this later when the concrete's ready to be poured, it's way too late. You can't go back and do this. It's got to be done now. So we're recommending that some kind of a report be put together with inspection logs and confirmation that that's all ready for the building official. There are still, at the time of writing this report, was one error in the storm sewer design. I'm sure they got that fixed, but it was just transposing a number. It stands out because it's off by 100 feet, so I don't think that's going to be built 100 feet off. I think they'll figure that out, but something that needs to be picked up. The old stormwater permit from this site has not been closed out. After site plan review, they did quickly turn in a new as-built, but there was some other paperwork that had to come along with that, so just want to make sure that you know we want to button that stuff up before we start anew. So that would be a condition. We've also asked for a little bit more information on the spillway. The way this site is designed, there's a lot of stormwater going to that pond. We know that the low flow outlets in these ponds are sometimes 1 and 2 inch and 3 inch holes that get plugged very easily. So a lot of times a pond might sit completely full and a storm might come before maintenance is done to clean up those outlets. So you might think the spillway here wouldn't come into play very often, but what we found out in these big industrial developments is the spillway comes into play a lot. So we want to make sure that that's listed clearly and there's 1 foot of freeboard there in protection. Also, this site is within our most restrictive stormwater zone A, which means that the outlet configuration is going to be a little bit more complicated than what they've called for. We can work through that at the stormwater permit stage, but we want to make sure that it's pointed out to you that there's no variance request here. They need to come into full compliance, and they'll have to do that through the permit. We asked for truck turning templates for that new truck dock that is on the northeast corner of the new addition, right where the hand is on the picture here. Haven't seen that yet, although I do think some stuff came in after the reports were written, so we'll have to work through that. If you can imagine backing into that spot and then wanting to turn left to come out to North Wilson, it doesn't work with most trucks. So I think what Brad was talking about was designated that for a specific truck, a smaller truck, so that it was easier to make that movement. We certainly don't want to encourage semis trying to get out of there. And it's really steep off the driveways out there too. It goes down in a hurry, so there's a safety concern. And then along with that, and along with the spillway protection, we want to make sure there's curb and gutter along the north side of that driveway, so that if water does go through the spillway and goes into that catch basin at the north end, that it's collected there. It doesn't just run down the bank. We've had a few of those failures, and those are not fun to watch because water is very powerful and it could get away from you in a hurry. So that would be our last condition. That's it.
Any comments or questions? Any comments or questions for Scott? Okay, thanks, Scott.
Rick Dunnebeck, D&K Engineered Construction. I'll answer some of your questions, and then Brad can answer the technical ones on the water. Basically, what they do is they build robotic systems. They'll fill this room with one robot that does all different stations. Tear it down, move it. And to do this, they just need floor space, and that's basically what they're adding in this building is just floor space to build systems. So that's their intent. With regards to a schedule, because of what we found with the last edition that we put on, every condition of type of soil you can imagine, the intent is to, by this late summer, do site work, and site work only. The building would not be touched until a year from the spring. That way, moving the pond, doing everything we have to do, you don't even want to think about trying to build a building until the site is complete, and then go back and build the building on top of it. So as far as your concerns about soil conditions, we'd find those ahead of time, deal with them as we're building the pond and getting the pad for the building set. So I think that answers your questions with regards to, and they are working on that drive area, the shared parking area. It's just something they took over years ago, and it's been 3 owners since the agreement was signed. So now it's just catching up with the latest, which is concrete cutting. So they'll deal with that, and they'll get that paperwork to you. So unless there's any other questions about what they do and the schedule, that's
I do have a quick question. It's probably for Frank. Do we have an expiration of site plan approval? Is it a 1 year?
Yes, in a nutshell, yes, but the way we apply the 1-year standard is if there was no activity on the site for a year, then your site plan expires. So if they start to make an investment in the site and do the site work, they get all the appropriate permits for the site work, then we would consider this to be a project underway, so that 1 year wouldn't kick in. If they don't do anything this year, and we're here a year from now, and nothing's been done, then technically the site plan would expire.
Understood.
Good question. Good clarification. Any other questions concerning this? This is not a public hearing, but if we've got anybody in the audience that has any questions about this, we'd welcome any questions from the audience. Okay. So at this point, we've got the projects before us. We've got recommendations from the city planner and a city engineer for conditions of approval. And I think that in addition to what Scott has in his report, he made note of the issue with regard to if it's not going to be paved, having that landscaped area where that parking's currently taking place. Okay, so, yeah, ready for a motion.
All right, I'll make a motion. Case number 20-856, motion for specialty tooling system site plan at 4215 3 Mile Road Northwest. I make a motion to approve the site plan and application for the proposed 54,000 square foot addition for specialty tooling systems, subject to the following conditions of approval. All conditions noted in the Walker Planning Director's report dated 2/24 of 2020. In addition, Tricia, do you want the dumpster listed? You didn't have that on your, I'll just make sure that that's listed in here.
Yeah, we can do that.
Okay,
I already have that site,
okay.
detail, but, we can certainly add that in there.
All conditions as noted in the Walker City Engineers Report dated 2/26/2020.
Support.
What about the 30 parking spaces? I don't know if that's in Scott's report.
So in terms of the 30 parking spaces, if they cannot get the agreement from the owner, then they would either need to pave that, well, they would essentially then need to cut it out and topsoil it. If they get the agreement, it has to be paved. We cannot leave it as gravel.
I support that.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor by Jason, supported by Scott. Any other questions? All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Motion carried. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next item on the agenda is case number 20-857, site plan review. This is 4243 Remembrance Road. The proposal to erect a church on this site. And we'll turn this over to Frank Wash, the Community Development Director.
Okay, thank you. You're getting both planning people taking turns here tonight. I see we have the church project management group here, so I'm going to let them discuss their project and the details of the project and their site plan. But what I wanted to do was just give the overall view of the site and then run through a couple of things that are in my staff report. So you can see on this is the cover sheet for the site plan. I'm sure most of you folks know where this is at. It's right across the street from City Hall here. Unusually shaped piece of property. It kind of looks like a B-2 bomber, which is interesting. I don't know how we got to that layout over time, but I imagine there was property selling, property buying. So you have what we would consider kind of an awkwardly shaped property that's almost 7 acres in area. So it's a large piece of property, a lot of angles to this, and then to the westerly side towards Wilson Avenue, there's a detention basin that Scott will handle, and I'm sure he'll discuss the details of that long-standing pond. So the address is 4250 Remembrance Road, and my understanding is the church has purchased the property. So we'll let those folks discuss that. Generally speaking, you have City Hall across the street, the Ace Hardware to the north, and then 2 established subdivisions to the south. For those of you who've been around for a while, you remember when we did a master plan discussion on this property and those around there. We discussed the future of a potential connection of Arbor Trail to Remembrance as a road. And we decided as a group to not do that there would be no road connection from Arbor Trail to Remembrance, but there would be a pedestrian connection. And that's what you see on the plan. There's a sidewalk connection to Remembrance Road. So that's a different perspective here. The lot has 606 feet of public road frontage on that long angle. And you can see that this is a good perspective, I think, to show some of the existing vegetation on the site, particularly along the southerly lot line, and then where the stormwater detention basin is at the northwesterly area. Site is zoned ORP, and as I noted in my staff report, there's a federal law called RLUIPA that was written to, from our standpoint, what it means is churches are allowed in any zoning district. So first question we always ask is the use permitted in the zoning district? And the answer here is yes. This is a snapshot of the site plan showing the layout of the parking lot and then the layout of the church. And again, I'll let the applicants talk about that and talk to their plan. You can see they are going to be building sidewalk on Remembrance Road, and then the sidewalk would wrap around into Arbor Trail. This is the landscaping plan, and one of my conditions that we'll get to in a second here, when I look at a site like this, particularly this time of year, it's difficult to do a landscape plan. We can put numbers and graphics on an image, but in practice, the best thing to do is wait until we get the spring bloom and then go out on the site with the developer, mark off the trees to be saved, particularly along that southerly lot line, because there is a nice tree line there. So you flag those off, and then you flag a no clear or no construction area, because you can save the trees, but if the bulldozers roll right up to the trees, then the soil gets compacted and the trees will die anyway. So you'll see one of my conditions is we need to preserve that buffer along the southerly lot line as much as possible. Where there will be gaps, they'll need to put landscaping in. We can figure that out in the field once the leaves come out. And then also along Remembrance Road, that's a lot of frontage. There's a sign that's going to be put in there. There are driveway clear vision corners. That's another thing that we can work out in the field. So one of our conditions is final review and approval of the landscaping plan by staff. And that's where our first bullet point is. The landscaping plan would be approved by staff. Site visit with the developer once the leaves come out. And then our goals would be to preserve the southerly trees as much as possible, flag the construction limits, and then develop an infill landscaping plan, a Remembrance Road landscaping plan. Other 2 conditions that I noted in my staff report, the fire chief has to approve the fire protection plan, and we'll let the developer talk about that. And then the building official must approve building height. This is a technicality in the zoning code. What's the building height? Well, it depends on the type of roof. So I call that out in my staff report. It's certainly not a flat roof. It's certainly not a mansard roof, which is the old McDonald's style roofs, if you remember those from a long time ago. It's a roof that I think, in my opinion at least, they have calculated the building height correctly according to the code. But that's really a building official call, so I want to make sure that the building official says, okay, that is the building height, 35 feet for this zoning district. And I believe that is the end of my report. So I will get out of the way and let Mr. Connors run through his report.
Any comments or questions for Frank at this point? Okay. Scott?
Yeah, we've got a little bit of a longer report. I think that's just kind of a product of having a site plan review that wasn't quite complete yet. There were still a lot of unknowns and some things to work through, so don't be alarmed. Some of these are more site plan review related, but to start off, we want to get the site address shown clearly on the cover sheet of all the plans that come through. That's kind of the sheet of record where you look for permits and things like that. Pretty standard. At the time of writing this report, we were looking at the calculations or looking at the detention pond design, and I think the applicant wanted to just put the storm sewer into the pond, and they just assumed that there was plenty of capacity there. But the pond has a long history, even includes a lawsuit that was pretty painful for a lot of us around here. But the pond has been, was built as part of the Deerfield plat to the south, also as part of the Ace Hardware to the north. I think in its early stages, this was even a small sewage lagoon, if you go way back when, before sanitary sewer was in the area, was later converted. I'm not sure how the heck that happened, but let's cross our fingers that that's all okay. But then it was added on to when the local restaurant came in as well. When I say the local, I mean the local. So, and you can kind of see that on some of the aerials where off on the east side, there was another piece of detention pond that was essentially carved out to create that extra capacity. So my point being here, we've got to make sure that we follow the rules and regulations very carefully. Since my report was written, I know they've submitted some additional information that does show the adding more detention, which is kind of what we need. And then there'll be some more details. The details have to be worked out both with Walker and with the Kent County Drain Commission, because the pond itself is in, or at least the majority of the pond is in an easement to Kent County Drain Commission for the plat. So it's kind of complicated, a lot of history, but I think we can work through that with the most recent submittals. The next item, you might see that generally when there's pavement, there's catch basins in the pavement to collect the water. That's required by ordinance. The one exception to that is if somebody's proposing some low impact development techniques, some stuff that's green, then we would consider that. And in this case, they want to run the water into the medians and then put rain gardens in the medians. And so we've agreed that, yeah, if it's designed correctly, that's a great idea. Millennium Park did a little bit of that. Helps to clean the water, helps put a lot of the water back in the ground. Those are all good things. Since my report was written, we have had an expert help take a look at that. And in general, those rain gardens look like a pretty good design. We've got a couple minor tweaks and additions that we'll work with them through the stormwater permit process on if they move forward. Next item is power pole in the driveway, pretty self-explanatory. We want to make sure that's called out. We don't want to get into an issue later where Consumers Energy's pointing fingers at us about issues like this. We run into that from time to time, so making sure that it's clear on the plan will help. We also need some additional sidewalk grades along Remembrance Road. It's a real delicate balance out there with the drainage because you've got an existing ditch section with the unregulated wetlands. So it's important that they give us grades on the sidewalk and then adjacent to the sidewalk so that we know how this all goes back together and the drainage still works. So we'll need that for highway permits and for staking. The driveway itself, I believe, was shown with 25-foot radii for the curbs. In the office, commercial, industrial details and zones, we typically want to see 30 feet. We've learned from the past where we have some 20s and 25s out there, and they get bumped quite often. And you might think with a church, why would we need to worry about that? But, if you're going to have weddings and things with limousines and motorhomes, those are all things that happen a lot with weddings. We want to make sure that, people can get in and out of there safely. So we'd recommend that they go with 30. If they want to do less than that, they can submit a variance. It doesn't have to go to the Zoning Board of Appeals. It's just a staff variance. And we'd be willing to consider that. As far as the frontage goes, you might ask why there's not going to be curb and gutter out front here. We have been trying to do that with all upgrades in zoning and development along Remembrance Road and Kinney and other major roads. I think in this case they chose to do a traffic study to try to warrant not having to put that in. And I think Frank would be best to discuss that because he's talked over that with the city attorney. So I'll defer that improved frontage discussion to Frank. Without the improved frontage, we will need appropriate drainage out front, and that means probably a culvert underneath the driveway. Again, that comes with more detail, more of a blown-up plan that shows actual grades with the sidewalk and the drainage and things like that. And then the last point, there's quite a long sanitary lateral there that is proposed to be split to two different parts of the building. Not the traditional way to do things in the Grand Rapids system or with the plumbing code. So they may have to make some changes there. There may be a chance that they can get that worked out. We did call Grand Rapids and they said they would be willing to listen. But we may have to consider either that one lateral goes in the building and then there's interior plumbing where it all gets split up, or they would have to build a piece of public sewer back there to have the two laterals. And that's really a kind of a fine-tuning detail that they can work through later. but they would need clean outs every 100 feet at least on the lateral. So some changes are due with that. And that's it for me.
Comments or questions for Scott?
Hey, Scott, on the driveway, I know we like to connect things directly across to the city walker, but do we see any conflict with the Ace Hardware driveway being so close, or?
Yeah, it's not very desirable,
Yeah.
for sure, but I think if we
didn't
push
want-
this driveway over more, then you get into kind of that left turn lock issue, and we've already got that with the Ace driveway and the driveway we have to City Hall now, where a lot of times people will end up nose to nose in the street, and they can't get to the driveways they're looking for. So I think in a perfect world, the Ace driveway would be removed and combined, but this is an imperfect world.
They have two, so we could close the one and ask them to. Gotcha.
We can ask, but
Yeah, I hear you.
past practice would be they want to hold on to that pretty tight.
Yep. The other comment that I have is I know, Frank, we were talking about the tree line and everything and going out there in the spring, and based on where the back end of this church ends up, it's 13.7 feet. To me, all those trees are coming down in that area right there. Is that, I mean, do they have the same, like a house? I mean, they only have like 10 or 15 feet off the property line, that's all they need? I guess I didn't,
We didn't put a setback table in the staff report. The site is zoned ORP, and it's unusually shaped. It's actually a double-fronted lot. There's frontage on Remembrance Road, and I believe they also have frontage on Wilson, right? Or did they sell that piece off? You sold that off, okay. So that makes it even easier. The front lot is Remembrance Road. The rear is to the west. The sides are to the northerly and the southerly, the jagged edge along the Ace Hardware, and then the long straight line that goes up against the Platts. I believe the side setback in the ORP is only 10 feet. So they exceed that. Now, that's something I'm sure that you'll want to talk with these folks. You're right, they'll probably have to clear whatever trees are there, but that's when maybe we can put something back that's smaller that'll grow back in over time. It is close to that lot line. One of the things we said when we looked at this plan is you folks really need to hold a neighborhood meeting just to make sure that the first time the neighbors see this plan isn't here. We found that that's pretty effective to do that, tends to let the developer and the neighborhoods talk and maybe amend some plans based on some concerns. So I'm sure you'll get an update on that. But yeah, it is close to the lot line. The trees right next to that pinch point there are probably going to be cleared. But that's where I think the applicant needs to talk about, what kind of treatments are going to be put on there. What's the building going to look like there? How tall the building is going to be? Where are the HVAC controls going to be? So does it meet zoning? Yes. Does it require some discussion? Yes.
Any other comments, questions? Scott, and how you explained that last portion dealing with the sanitary sewer lateral, what you have in the report will, if that's adopted as a condition, that would cover those contingencies, correct?
I think so. Ultimately, it still needs to be approved by Grand Rapids, but it would be wise, I don't know if Frank had it as a condition, but to then adopt our memo as well. But I think you'd be covered then.
I think I put that in on our model memo, was Scott's report as one of the conditions of approval. It's the last page in the packet.
Okay.
Yes. You might have to fill the date in, but it's part of the template.
Okay. All right. Again, this is not a public hearing, but if there's those out in the audience that have any questions about this, this is an opportunity to. Oh, yeah, the applicant. That's right. Applicant, come forward, please. Thanks.
Thank you. Mike Matzella from Fleece and Vanderbrink Engineering. Did the site work on the plan and also a member of the church, so that is an interesting relationship. Just wanted to make one comment before I answer some of the questions. On the agenda, I had the wrong address. I don't know if that matters, but I think it should be 4250. So,
It's in the staff reports.
Okay.
and It's by PPN too,
Didn't know.
so.
didn't want to redo this, but, if I miss any of your,
I'll take the blame for that.
that's okay. If I miss any of your questions, just, you can ask me. Yeah, the site plan kind of speaks for itself. We have the parking out front, the church behind. I guess I could talk about the pond first. I came under the assumption when we got into this that that pond was built for the whole area. I think it was owned by one entity at one time, so I just assumed that pond was, you know, for the whole area, and we kind of looked at it and thought it might work. But was talking with Scott, we realized that, you know, it had been made just for that plat at one time and Ace Hardware, and that it had been expanded. So we were prepared to expand it as well, and I sent those plans to Scott, so we're fine with that. And we'll work with the engineer and the Drain Commission to answer all their questions. So we have no problem with that. We're fine with putting grades there and culvert under the driveway. That makes good sense. Everything else has a good culvert, so no problem there. As to the landscaping, you know, we're prepared to work with whatever you need, you know. I didn't want to put something on the plan along Remembrance that you didn't like. You know, we wanted to blend in with your elms as best we can there, so. I don't know if you had any other specific questions. You know, we just want to be a good partner with the city. We're right across from you guys, and a good partner for the community as well. So I think David can probably speak a little bit more to the architect, to the encroachment there on the south. I don't know if, David, you want to say a few words on that?
David Shull, architect, Progressive AE, also a member of the church. In regard to the part of the building that comes closest to the southern property line, that is actually, you know, some of the challenge of the triangular site and starting to stay close to the street and handle the parking regulations in this. We do have that one area that is close. In terms of the architecture, it is residential height wall at that location, sloped roof. That corner actually comes close to that southern property line where the adjacent residential properties actually divide. So the house facing the cul-de-sac to the west and the house facing the cul-de-sac to the east, the corner of our building that comes close is right there at their property line in between. So it's as far away from the residences as we can get. And we also would like to protect the landscaping as much as possible. And so in that one area, we'll have to be sensitive and delicate to how we maybe plant back where we need to encroach. But we felt like that kind of an approach was as kind to our neighbors, because we want to be a good neighbor as can be.
It looks like on the plan, the one that I'm looking at from the south, that there's an extension to the building at the end that I don't know if it really, I'm thinking it could be the very last section. I wonder if that could be put on the side and taken away from the back of the building. I don't know if it, you know, to give you more space between. So there's that one section there where the
You're
arrow's
talking
touching.
about the projection that comes to the sort of
Yeah, I don't know
south
what's in
and
that.
west there.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's, I mean, we're within the limits of the site. We'd like to keep it if we could.
that's fine. I understand. What's going to be in that back building back there? Is there?
That's actually a children's classroom, and adjacent to it would be resource storage. So there really wouldn't be an active area of the building from an intersection with the neighbors or noisy area at all.
What about outside air conditioning units, anything like that? Is it going to be in the back of the building there? Or are they going to be on the roofs?
There will be air conditioning. If you were to read that plan where the restrooms are, there will be HVAC platform above those restrooms.
Okay.
So those units would be probably close to that area just outside those toilet rooms, if there were any condensers or compressors.
Thanks, Pat. Any other comments, questions? Okay, we're pretty good for that right there. And I'll go back to, if you have any questions from the audience about this project, you can have them up there.
I
Dave?
did have one thing Frank made reference to. We did hold a neighborhood meeting. We rented a room over at the Ice Arena for an evening, February 11th from 6 to 8 p.m. We had a total of 1 visitor from the Vine Church. So we took that as a good sign because we anticipated that if we had a lot of visitors, it would be because there were large concerns. We did a mailing to, I think, 85 different neighbors to invite them to it. And I took home a lot of refreshments.
Okay, all right. Any comments you want to offer?
My name's Laura Bull. I live at 2186 Arbor Court, so I'm going to be a neighbor at the end of the cul-de-sac there. We're really happy that it's a church, and we're excited. I think our only concern was the buffer of the trees, just because it kind of just provides a natural barrier, and so we would be hopeful that landscaping would be provided to still protect that area between the houses. And I also was kind of wondering about lighting, because it is, it will be pretty close to the houses, and just to be mindful of how lit up it will be at night, But sorry we missed your open house. It was very kind of you to invite us. And yeah, we're hopeful for the future, I guess. Thanks.
Yeah, with regard to the existing landscaping, the recommendation from staff is that they, if you heard it a little bit earlier, that in the springtime, they would walk the site, both the city staff and the developer, kind of talk through what could be saved in order to retain as much of that natural barrier that's there.
Yeah.
And with regard to the lighting plan, Frank?
Would you like to see, can I help explain lighting?
That would be great.
Okay. If the chair says okay, we're going to do it. All right. I think the chair said okay, right?
Yes, yes.
Let me zoom out a second here. So site lighting is something that's part of our site plan review process, and I'm going to focus on, even I'm a little bit backwards on this thing. This, I believe, is the lot line that goes up.
That's your south property line.
That's our south property line. So that's up against the residential.
Correct. You rotate it.
Let me get square here first. Counterclockwise. This way? Hold on, even I'm confused.
A little too far.
Now I'm confused.
There you go.
There we go. So the takeaway point is this up against Arbor Trail and the subdivision?
Yes.
Okay, we all agree on that. If you look close on here, what we require, what Patricia said for the previous plan, we need 0 lumens at the lot line. What does that mean? It means the lights can't bleed onto adjacent properties, right? Okay. With new LED fixtures, which they're proposing, which are shown over here, they're able to cut that light so there's 0 at the lot line. So whatever will be on the building or whatever will be on the light poles, they need to be at 0 by the time they hit your lot. And with these new fixtures, new LED fixtures, the fixture itself is very bright if you look at it, but the light is really coned out. If you look at the lights that are in our parking lot here, those are LEDs. And if you don't look up at the fixture, because they're super bright, but if you stand back and look at where the light goes, it's really confined on its site. It's not like the old yard lights that used to just boom out with, orange light or whatever. So, that was one of the directives we had for these folks, is you need to meet 0 when you're up against the residential lot line, and they've done that.
So that, those photometrics are mostly for the parking lot. You guys, are you gonna have anything on the back of the building? Because that's probably the most critical spot. Okay, good.
The entire south, the building itself does not have outdoor lighting other than pot lights at the exit doors, which is required code. And there would be those black dots in the center of the light pole locations, which are limited to 22-foot height by the ordinance. And but same token, we'd be happy to walk you through and look with you at landscaping if that is of interest to you, if you're happy to do that.
And we just noticed a couple weeks ago that all the property was staked off and where the ribbons were, so it was real close to our backyard. Real close.
And that's why we went to walk it in the spring, is to see what would be the appropriate feedback to respond to, this would be the place to take care of these things, yes.
Now I'm oriented, so this, Mr. Connors, as usual, exactly correct. Right through here, this is
all being recorded.
Yes, it is being recorded for posterity, and this is the parking lot. But here's the location where the building would be close to these folks' home. And that's one of the reasons why we asked for a building lighting plan. And what they're saying is there won't be any lights in this part of the building.
There's an exit door there though, Frank, so there will be a light in that corner there.
So there will be,
Downlight underneath the
Yeah.
soffit, yes.
so LED, zero.
Likely, yes.
Yeah, so that's something that we'll definitely make sure that the light that goes in here will be a, for lack of a better term, shielded fixture with a light going straight down. It won't just be a yard light.
And Dave, you said you could make that in the soffit, correct?
Yes.
So that's great.
There you go.
Okay, great. So we've had some discussion, we got recommendations before us. Anyone ready? Well, Pat, go
I've
ahead.
got one question, just kind of off the, for Scott. That Arbor Trail cul-de-sac, is that a legal cul-de-sac now? Or does that need to be redone with this? It's not part of this project, but I mean,
It's one of about a dozen cul-de-sacs just like that, that were built to allow a future extension, and the future extension never came.
so it just stays the way it is?
At one point, we had a dream, I have a dream speech. We were gonna go around and try to fix these maybe one at a time. But it's a lot of money to upgrade those. There's right-of-way requirements. Oftentimes, you have to fix and rebuild people's driveways to do that. So there is not a plan in place. There's not funding in place to run around and do those right now. So I think this one is gonna stay largely the way it is.
As far as the church goes, I mean, there's some more property in the back there. Is there any plans to put anything back there? I mean, sometimes churches have put in like a softball field, basketball courts, as they grow. Any plans? That could mean some more lighting back there.
There are no present plans. We intend to treat that like it's a house with a backyard is the way we look at it.
I'll make a motion. Case number 20-857, motion for Grand Rapids Central Seventh-day Adventist Church site plan at 4250 Remembrance Road, Northwest. I make a motion to approve the site plan and application for Grand Rapids Central Seventh-day Adventist Church. All conditions as noted in the Walker Community Development Director's report dated 2/25/2020. All conditions as noted in the city engineer's report dated 2/25/2020. And then the third condition would just be special attention to the landscaping in the back, which staff will be taking care of.
We have support.
Support.
Motion by Jason, supported by Scott, to conditionally approve the site plan submitted for this project. If there's no other comments or questions, all those in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, same sign. Motion carried. Thank you very much. It looks like we're at the end of the agenda. Is there any other comments from the staff you want to offer?
Can I give you just two quick updates? Your next agenda, 2 weeks from now, you will see the AGO gas station for preliminary area site plan and final area site plan approval. The only way that would get derailed is if the city commission for some reason said no to the rezoning. I don't see that happening. Usually when they do the first, then everything is okay. The other item on that agenda will be Blaze Fire Protection. They'll be putting a new building on Northridge. in one of the few vacant lots in the area of Ridgeview Stamping. You folks approved a couple of other buildings there over the last couple of years. There's one more lot left. I think it was Northridge, and then I can't remember the name of the connecting street, but that'll be a new industrial building there. So that'll be your agenda 2 weeks from now. And as we talked about last time, the distribution draft for the 2020 master plan is scheduled for review by you folks on April 15th. Our consultants will get you that distribution draft by the 2nd of April. That way you'll have a couple of weeks to look through it. Other than that, I'll hand it over to the rest. Tricia or Scott, if you've got any comments.
No comments.
I could talk all night, but I'm tired.
This is a comment on my end. I'll have to sit out on the blaze fire protection one.
Okay.
Make a motion to adjourn. I make that motion.
Motion, support. All those in favor? Aye. Thank you.